You got skills. You got skills, bring it on. Let us get up on the mic and start to spit up on these songs. All these cats in this bitch think they lyrically strong.
Don't be afraid to let them know that you overmatched.
You got skills, bring it on. Let us get up on the mic and start to spit up on these songs. All these cats in this bitch think they lyrically strong.
Don't be afraid to let them know that you overmatched.
I'm that lyricist, doc, with an untamed style to put that tingle in your ear to make you freak.
How come it's so much fun to do dangerous things, especially during your teens?
With the illness, realness,
Like climbing up high or riding fast.
so I can cuff that shit together, cause I'm holding this club for ransom.
There is an important function in the brain, a reward system, which showers our senses with a happiness serum when we do things that are good for us. But surprisingly often, it rewards us for things that are risky or even downright dangerous, especially during our teens.
There's a reason why humans have evolved to have a highly sensitive reward system. And that's because the things that we find rewarding are things that in general keep us alive. Things that taste sweet, or sex, or the attention of other people. And we find these things rewarding because we wouldn't have lasted as a species if we didn't have these things and if we didn't pursue them. Adolescence is a very important period in brain development. There is maturation of the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain right behind the forehead. And that's very important for things like complicated thinking and executive function.
The brain is plastic, meaning that it rebuilds neural pathways when we learn something new. This frontal part of the brain, where we decide what is good or bad, doesn't mature until we are in our 20s.
A second important change during adolescence involves a part of the brain we call the limbic system. And that's very important for the experience of emotion, for example, and reward, and fear, and punishment. The changes in the limbic system that lead individuals to become more reward sensitive take place early in adolescence, but at the same time that this is happening, we still have an immature prefrontal cortex. So we have immature self-regulation, immature impulse control. And so the combination makes this a time of risk-taking and potentially reckless and even harmful behavior. We often draw a comparison between having a car where the accelerator is active, but there isn't a good braking system in place yet. So if you look at crime, for example, which is a very risky behavior, you see that crime goes up as individuals move into and through adolescence. It peaks at around 17 or 18, depending upon the crime, and then it declines as individuals mature into adulthood. And what's interesting about this is that this same age pattern is seen all over the world. And so it probably has a lot to do with the basic biology of adolescent development. Anything that is rewarding has the potential to create an addiction, like gambling, let's say. Activity in the brain is regulated in part by chemicals called neurotransmitters. And one of the most important neurotransmitters is a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine is especially important in our experience of pleasure or reward. And some individuals even talk about a dopamine squirt that we get when we're anticipating something very rewarding, like a good meal, or sex, or money. And because early adolescence, around the time of puberty, is an important period in the development of the dopamine system, it's very vulnerable to the effects of artificial rewards that look very much like dopamine to the brain when we smoke, or when we drink, or when we use illicit drugs. An interesting statistic in light of this is that individuals who start using these substances early in adolescence are much, much more likely to develop addiction than individuals who use the same substances in the same amounts, but who don't start until later in adolescence. If we think about adolescence in an evolutionary context, and think, well, why do we have adolescence? Why does it exist as a part of development? And in other primates, which are our closest, comparison, shortly after puberty, most primates leave their family of origin and they venture out into the wild in order to find a mate and reproduce. And that's very good because reproduction inside the family would increase the risk for genetic mutations. So it's good that they leave. And so I think that adolescence has been kind of programmed to be a time when people might be more willing to take risks because that was a very important aspect of adolescence at the time that we evolved. The irony is that many of the things that adults wish that adolescents wouldn't do are things that feel good, which is why they do them. I mean, that's right. That's why people use drugs, because the drugs feel good to them. And that's why adolescents want to have sex, because the sex feels good to them. And so in some senses, our attempts to regulate these behaviors are going against something that is a very, very strong biological part of what it means to be a teenager.